You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. When I was a young boy, my father would tell me...
When he was a young boy... Oh, sorry, I thought we were doing a musical episode.
No.
Okay.
When I was a young boy, my father would tell me every spring, wait until Memorial Day. And on Memorial Day, you take a look at the standings, you take a look at your team, you take a look at who's good, you take a look at who's bad, and then you know what your team is. Now, for White Sox fans... there's absolutely no way in the next couple of weeks something is going to change my mind about what this team is. And it's
Nope, we're pretty much there.
It's really weird to me that I already know what the team is. And I think it's weird for those that cover the team, and those that root for the team, and those that follow the team, and those that like to tweet about the team, or whatever you call it these days. Because it's hot take central now about the White Sox. It's the one team that everybody knows what they are, so everybody's ready to pass their judgment on what they should do next. And it feels early, but I think it's because they are the rare exception to Dad's rule about wait until Memorial Day.
And yeah, that's all that's left, because we've talked about what few narratives there are long-term on this team, at least for this season. Not long-term in terms of like, what could they be in 25, 26, and so on. But there's very little to sit there and say that by the end of the year, we're going to have clarity on X, Y, and Z, because this is such a transition year for the team that it really is. It almost feels like the trade deadline is here with hot takes, or it feels like, even discussions about Pedro's future, are hot takes, even discussions about, what can they do or not do with the draft if they continue to lose at this amazing rate that they've been losing at. I mean,
not much. They have to pick outside the top 10. So that's the thing. The losing means nothing. You know what they are, although you kind of can also mark on the calendar, this will be a fun weekend. Like the weekend that's coming up, I think will be a big weekend over there at the rate. I really do. I think they got a big giveaway on Saturday. There's a huge following for Harry Potter, and they're giving out Harry Potter White Sox attire on Friday. Sunday should be a great game. If you just want to take in a ball game, the weather's getting warmer. I'm thinking about going out there on Sunday. I'm thinking about going to Cork and Carry, 33rd and Princeton, in the shadow of the ballpark. In fact, get there pregame, and I think you're going to find me at the bar. I'll buy you a beer, because I can't stay away any longer. Things are starting to ease around the house. Like I got one kid that's about to graduate from high school. We're at the back end of all the divorce stuff. I got one kid whose water polo is coming to an end, and they play constantly. Like there's just so much that is coming to an end here in the Lanuti house. And I'm like, I have time for baseball now. So Sunday, my plan is to be out there, stop by, award-winning burgers, ballpark favorites. The bar is spectacular. They got an amazing array of craft beers, spirits, and wines, indoor, outdoor seating. I can't wait to see the friendly staff come out and see me. I'll be hanging there. Ed's thinking we might actually go to Friday's game too. He just hit me with. So we're going to be at the ballpark all weekend long. I know what to expect when I go there. I know what the team is. And
there's no illusions here.
No. So it makes sense. Everybody's on to now, what are they going to do? Who are they going to trade? We saw the Marlins already make a trade. So now everybody's like, okay, well, the White Sox make sense. They're going to make a trade. So Bob Nightingale, who I find really interesting, he put out this article on the 5th of May. And the article's got a little tidbit about the White Sox that everybody zoomed in on. The thing that was most interesting to me about the article was that there was a big section on it that had to do with Kenny Williams and what he's doing with his life these days. And it's so in-depth, it continues to back up my feeling that Kenny was one of the main people that fed Bob information.
Well, yeah.
Like now I look back at it and I go, okay, look at the write-up on Kenny Williams in this article and how much he's talked about in the quotes from Kenny. And I'm like, this guy was Bob's guy. Bob was Kenny's guy. Because it's just a weird thing to put in your MLB article is like, let's check in on Kenny Williams. Nobody cares. I don't care. You don't care. But Bob cared enough because of their relationship with each other. That's how I took it. But later on in the article that was put out on the 5th, Here's what he says. The White Sox, off to their worst start in franchise history. I love that. It rolls right off the tongue. Are still hoping to trade Tommy Pham, to the highest bidder before the trade deadline. Well, of course you are. Tommy Pham came to play for you for the most amount of money because he's in the business of Tommy Pham and he's a good ball player. And now you got to be in the business of the White Sox because next year he's going to go for the most money after what he goes in and he does on the field. And he's a 1-year guy that's giving you a little bit of a boost. So Pham to the highest bidder at the trade deadline makes sense. The White Sox
100%.
are also expected to trade starters Eric Fetty, Chris Flexen, Mike Clevenger, Michael Kopech, and Eloy Jimenez. Now, that list is interesting to me. First of all, saying that you're ready to trade Chris Flexen away, that's an obvious one, right? Like, I don't know what you're getting for him. Could be a bucket of balls. I mean, he's a flex starter reliever at best who's back end of the rotation. Like, he's not an impact arm to a team that's looking for an arm. Mike Clevenger didn't have the debut to start the season that makes him very tradable, but if he gets to what he is on his baseball card, then yes, he's definitely a piece that you're going to move for something. But I don't think you're getting massive impact return for any of these guys. Eloy Jimenez, he isn't that good right now, and he's got the injury history, and he's got a big price tag to him. Like, that's a pie in the sky wish right now that he's going to make himself valuable enough that you're going to get anything worthwhile back in a trade for him. Michael Kopech, somebody may say, yeah, there's room in my bullpen. What do we always say about him? Room in my bullpen for a guy like Michael Kopech. He may be the most valuable thing. Eric Fetty, to round this out, is the one that I'm confused by. What do you have for next year? If you're not trading Luis Robert Jr., Ed, if you're not going complete full rebuild and you're trying to tell me it's a quick turnaround, you have the guy for next year. You better get something that's worth moving him because he's a piece right now while you don't have a lot of pieces in your rotation for 2025.
Well, and here, let me pull up Ed from like 6 months ago and then from last year and from a few years ago, who's going to recite what he always recites about trades, which is that first and foremost, you have to have a willing partner. And the guys you're attempting to trade off have to fit somewhere perfectly. In this case, present day Ed will take back over and say, Luis Ariz went to the Padres because the Padres have an infield problem because Manny Machado's hurt and Graham Pauley, who is taking his place as a rookie who is way in over his head, and Xander Bogaerts hasn't lived up to his contract. So they needed a second baseman really, really badly. The Marlins were willing to give up one. Now, look at the White Sox. You're right. Michael Kopech has some value as a guy that has shown even the potential to close games. Eric Fetty, as a starting pitcher, has shown that he might be able to hold down the back of somebody's rotation. He is not an ace-level guy, even though he's had some good games. You've got things that yes, you are willing to part with potentially, but it is a two-pronged thing. One, why on earth would you sit there and say we're going to walk into next year with just Garrett Crochet as a member of this rotation because Nick Destrini, one good game, one terrible game. Jonathan Cannon, one good game, one terrible game. Jared Schuster's been a little up and down, and he's been mostly pitching out of the bullpen anyway. Chris Flexen is not signed for next year. Neither is Clevenger. Like you're running guys out there that are not going to be around next year, except for Eric Fetty and Garrett Crochet. So I don't know that Fetty's necessarily a given that he's going to move, but also what are you getting back for these guys is the question, and who needs them and who wants them. I don't know that there's much of an Eloy Jimenez market until we know that there's a team that has offensive woes that definitely needs an Eloy Jimenez type, or at least the potential again of an Eloy Jimenez type. Because that's the other problem is that Eloy Jimenez, really everybody on this team, with the exception of Tommy Pham, who is pretty much a given as to what Tommy Pham is, because he's in the business of Tommy Pham, and he's made sure that everybody knows what Tommy Pham is. All we're ever talking about is the potential of Eloy Jimenez, right? He's got 40 home run potential. Well, but he hasn't really done it on a consistent basis to show that he could achieve that level. Andrew Vaughn's got potential to be a good hitter. Does he, though? We don't know because he hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, I'm already done with him. That's the thing. Like, there's a guy who should be on the list. the White Sox should be trying
Gavin
to deal him.
Sheik should be on the list.
Right. Those guys should be on that list as well because they don't bring you enough that you're building for the future. And the only thing that I hope is the reason they're not on the list is because somebody within the White Sox is like, well, we could put them on the list, but we're not going to get anything for them. Sox in the Basement listeners, switch to a new age of life. Hyatt Home Medical Equipment wants to help you keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living. Make it so they can get around on their own, live independently. Stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, even a bathroom remodeling may be in order, and Hyatt can help you with that. They work with insurance and have 0% financing for qualified individuals. They also have the latest and greatest in CPAP machines. They'll even mail supplies for the machine directly to you, and they have the latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors. It's all at Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Learn more at hhme.com. Jimenez, I want to get on that point real quick because I had a conversation with my friend Craig Toth, who does Bucks in the Basement, who I help out from time to time, but I'm doing less and less of that because he's doing so well out in Pittsburgh with his podcast. He didn't know how to do it at first, but now he's entrenched in there. There was just a thing about Paul Skeens out there where everybody, including the voice of the team, was reporting that Skeens was going to be up this week. And Craig was the lone voice that said that his sources had Skeens sitting down in the minor leagues and had to be at about 40 innings pitched for the month of May, and that he would be up. And he actually gave a date at the end of May. And it sounds like he's right. He's the only guy covering the Pirates.
Does sound like he's right.
That is right. He's the only guy right. So he knows what he's talking about. And he says to me, I wish we weren't bringing up a guy like Nick Gonzalez, who's like one of their higher prospects, who's a second baseman. He goes, because he's got a lot of flaws, but right now he looks really good in the minors. And I would love to fleece a team to get him. And what do? I go, well, if Eloy Jimenez started hitting, would you want him? Because they've got Andrew McCutchen in there right now in their DH spot, hitting 187 and done. Like he's done.
Yeah, Kutch seems to be done.
They've actually got several guys on that team who have Mendoza line averages. The difference between them and the White Sox and why the Pirates are only 2 games under and there's more hope in Pittsburgh this year is because they have pitching, lots of pitching, and their young pitching is showing up and looking good. I mean, they have found pitchers they're going to have control of for years, and everybody on that team's like got a 1.10 whip in their starting rotation. So they're going to survive, and they've got their young talent getting there, and they're in a better spot than the Sox are right now. And it was funny,
I'm guessing the Pirates don't have 1 through 9. All of their hitters have sub Mendoza.
Oh yeah, they've got just as bad a hitting as the White Sox have. You can look at their lineup right now and be like, it's the White Sox lineup. The difference is the pitching. The difference is the pitching and that there's more arrows pointing up when we already know what our players are. But I found myself trying to sell him on Eloy, and what he's trying to sell me is a guy that probably is just going to be a bust when he gets here. And I'm like, that's probably what we're getting for a guy like Eloy Jimenez, right? We're going to trade somebody and say, well, we fooled them. And they're going to trade us somebody back and they're going to be like, well, we fooled them, because that's what it is. And that probably wouldn't even work because the Pirates are never taking on $13 million next year in an Eloy Jimenez. So, I mean, like, it's hard to find a partner. And then what is this guy doing? He's trying to tell me, well, Nick Gonzalez, look at him. And that's what we're going to get for these players. The point I'm trying to make is you look at the list that Nightingale puts out, you're going to get somebody else's crap. Somebody else is going to say, hey, I got this over here. He hasn't worked out yet, but you may be able to develop him. And you tell me that sentence and then tell me the White Sox have a history of fixing people and making them better, developing them when other teams couldn't develop them. So, I mean, it's interesting to have Bob talking already, like Nightingale's like, oh, well, these are the guys they're probably going to move. And I go, but what are they really going to get back? Like, so I'm not that excited about moving guys. And that, again, that goes back to why Fetty wouldn't be on my list, because at least I know what he is and I know what he is next year. And if you really want to convince me you're going for a quick turnaround, you can always deal him next season, mid-season, to get something if it doesn't work out the way that you're trying to sell me that it will in 2025.
Or you can always deal him in the off season where you have him under contract when you've been able to establish more. So like by the end of the year, if, for example, by the end of the year, you're looking at it going, hey, Garrett Crochet really came along. Like he had his ups and downs, but we're really confident in his spot in the rotation next year. And after, some adjustments, Nistrini and Cannon and whoever, Eater, whoever, they end up to bringing up and having starts here, really does it. Or, there's something that happens. Drew Thorpe comes up and you're really convinced about his role. If you're looking at it and Fedde becomes an extra at that point, okay, or he becomes something where it's like, hey, for what we're paying Eric Fedde for this year, we actually went out on the market and did this and this, and we're better off that way. So we're going to trade him because we also have a willing partner. That's, there's all sorts of opportunities when it comes to Eric Fedde.
He's more valuable in the offseason. He's clearly somebody
Probably.
you hold. Well, I mean, seriously, what can he do other than increase his value this year for you? I mean, otherwise, think about how the trade pool is always a mess in midseason, right? Again, you got to find willing trade partners. There's you could just chop off half the league is not even interested in any kind of trade.
Exactly. There's a whole bunch of non-contenders who are not going to trade with the White Sox because they understand what they are, or, to the extent that they're fighting for that last wild card spot, or they feel like they got a shot within a division somewhere. And I'm not going to start naming names because I don't really care that much right now. It's not even Memorial Day yet. But when they start to figure out who they are and what they are, where their deficiencies are, they're going to make a decision as to whether or not they want to do something in-house and try and develop a guy that they have, or use, an aging free agent, try and squeeze the last drops out of him or whatever they have available to them, or if they're going to make a trade that's going to try and bring it. But then again, you sit there and you look at it and you go, is anybody committing to Eloy Jimenez? Is anybody going to commit to Eric Fedde for that matter? Because if you're trading for somebody mid-season, if you need a pitching replacement, if you need somebody to cover innings for you, and you're coming to the White Sox superstore here, the Kmart of the Midwest and the East Coast and West Coast, it's just the Kmart of the United States right now.
We're more like the dollar store right now.
No, you know what? People rely on dollar stores to live off of.
We're a Zaire.
Zaire. Woolworth. We're Woolworth. So yeah, Zaire or Venture, take your pick.
That's exactly what
Actually, I think Venture had black and white stripes.
Right.
So
and the bargain may be Michael Kopech in that whole thing.
Well, and that's the thing is where I'm going with that is that somebody's looking at this going, I need a reliever. Everybody always needs a reliever down the stretch. Somebody's going to want Michael Kopech. Now, what are they going to be willing to give up? And can it be something that isn't their project that went awry? Okay.
Well, here's why he's valuable, Ed. All those names besides him and Fedde, well, look, you can option out of the Eloy Jimenez thing, or you can pay him, right? Then you got a bunch of guys who are just here for this year. Then you got Fedde, who's signed for this year and next. Then you got Kopech, who's on $3 million in his arbitration 2-year and has an ARB year next year. So you can bring in a relief pitcher and then go to arbitration with him, where I would think there's got to be some impact on his number because he's no longer a starter. And you would think that is a valuable piece who you have control of for the extra year. So we're talking about a guy with the rest of this year control, next year control, not a high price tag, who's starting to show that he can get high leverage outs late in a game for a team trying to make a pennant push. He may be the most valuable player that you can deal right now off of this team, especially if you're going to subscribe to the notion that unless you knock the White Sox socks off with a Fedde offer, when they know they can go into the offseason and have far more teams involved with him and see, do we need him for 25, or did we develop enough, and is there enough for us to do here this offseason where we don't need him? You would think that the Sox probably would hold that chip unless they were blown away. Kopech seems like the most likely to bring back the best, at least in my mind, looking at that list.
Yeah, and that's where it comes into play is what are they going to get back, right? And how is it going to move the needle towards 2025 and 2026? Because, you look at, for example, what the Padres traded to the Marlins. A lot of minor leaguers there, nobody who is going to make an immediate impact for Florida. Not really something that the White Sox probably want to do necessarily with Michael Kopech if they're trying to get something out of the good years that they have with Luis Robert Jr. Now, the other thing, too, is that Kopech might be one of those where Chris Getz says, blow my socks off about this because, like you said, he's under control and he is capable of getting the high leverage outs. And the White Sox may need that. They may need to find that as well if they trade him away, they might need to figure out how to replace that. So when you're talking about Fedde and Kopech, it might have to be something that's overwhelming. But when you're looking at the guys that are going to move and bring back something quickly, okay, and are going to move faster, I don't think that those are the two guys that move fast. I think Chris Flexen is more valuable to somebody in regards to, like, I can put him in the rotation if I need him. I can put him in the bullpen if I need him. He's a swing guy. He's a veteran. He's done this before. And, this pitcher that I'm trying to replace, he's not out for the season. He's just out for a couple of months. He's out for a month, whatever it is, right? That's the kind of guy that gets moved earlier on.
Shockingly, Martin Maldonado is not on that list, which is shocking. You would think somebody would want him.
Now, you laugh. You laugh.
I laugh because there is no value to him. I'm sorry. Corey Lee should be playing all the time. They're playing him more like that. At least we found a catcher, Ed. Like, that's what I'm looking for positives. Corey Lee's my positive.
We did find a catcher. Corey Lee, I like what Corey Lee's doing right now. I really do. You laugh, though. And Maldonado's the kind of guy, though, that sometimes will show up in a move as well. But you're not getting anything back for him, right? This is Maldonado becomes a guy that what you get back is such a lottery ticket or such a dart throw. And when I say lottery ticket, some people take that to sit there and being like, oh yeah, it could be a star. It could be amazing. And it's like, no, it's a piece of paper that you get a bunch of stuff all over your fingers and then nothing happens because you never win with it, right? The odds are astronomically against you actually getting anything out of this particular player. But the point of this too is that at some point on some level, they got to continue to field a team. So you can't expect that Chris Getz is going to, one, be able to trade everybody off, two, that he's going to trade everybody off that Bob Nightingale listed, or three, that anybody's really interested in these guys versus what they can get from other teams. Because again, if Chris Getz is playing the game he played with Dylan Cease a little bit, and if his ask is high in season, there's not as much time to negotiate with this. There's not as much time to sit there and hold your cards. So if somebody comes and asks about Eric Fedde, and Chris Getz is like, yeah, but you know what? I really want this guy, and they're like, well, we're not giving him up. There's another Eric Fedde waiting on another team. I don't know what that other Eric Fedde's name is. I don't know if he's as good, but there's another Eric Fedde waiting around the corner. There's another Michael Kopech waiting around the corner too. There's other guys that are out there. We don't have a team, as is evidenced by the record and everything else, the eye test of just watching this team. This is not a team full of players. This is not a roster that you go up and down and look at and go, everybody wants these guys. They're just, they just haven't put it together. No, this is a bunch of cast-offs that it's not a whole lot of value to anyone.
Support Sox in the Basement by making your next wager with one of our preferred sports books. We've got some of the best offers out there. Heck, I'm going to say it. The best offers out there are at soxinthebasement.com. Also, check out our brand new Vouch store supporting small business. Everything from camp craft cocktails, where you can become an expert bartender at your own home bar, or supporting disabled veterans and purchasing some Split Rock coffee. There's more than just the podcast at soxinthebasement.com. Do we know what the plan is? Like, if we look at what they're doing, what they have, and not so much what they say, because I don't trust everything that comes out of the organization. I think that anybody who's been a fan of this team long enough has to take everything that they say with a grain of salt. What is the plan? And we talked about Corey Lee there for a second. I know what my plan would be, Ed. My plan would be that he's catching every day. My plan would be that Brian Ramos is staying as long as he can hit and as long as he can just be halfway decent. I would keep him up here and have him play third base as long as he was just not showing that he was overmatched. If he could just hang in there long enough and we can get some time with the kid, then I'd be playing the kid at this point. I'd be trying to work these AAA pitchers like Nastrini and Cannon and anybody else that you want to take a look at. These guys should be popping up and down all year long, and we should be giving them every opportunity to see whether or not they've learned something from the last time that they were up here. I want to see the players that have a chance of being impactful as soon as 2025 season begins, getting as much playing time as possible. And I see Colson Montgomery down there having a good week or two. I want to see that happen for a little while longer. But if he does what he's doing now for a consistent month or two, I want to see him in the back half of the season playing shortstop. Like I'm still on the idea that the plan could be, and this goes back to the Fetty talk, the plan could be realistically having a rotation together that's mostly these guys that are currently in system and possibly going out and picking up somebody who's at the price tag of what Clevenger was this year or Fetty was this year and adding them into the rotation and taking $40 million that you're taking off the books in Jimenez and Moncada, either by trade, but more than likely by buying them out and using that to add some professional bats into what you have and being a better team next year, right? Not a World Series contender, but a team that I can go out and say, let's see what the kids can do. It doesn't need to be 3 years of a long rebuild. The fact that I'm not hearing the White Sox even suggest moving Luis Robert Jr. makes me believe that that is still the plan. Am I nuts?
No, you're not nuts. You're not nuts. I think that is the plan because this was going to be a lost year. No matter what Chris Getz said about wanting to compete, okay? This was going to be a year that they were going to be in a state of flux. And the one thing I will say about it still being before Memorial Day is that it doesn't mean that at some point and on some level in the coming months of this season that this team couldn't start to look more interesting on the field. I mean, they're not going to win anything. They're not going to go to the playoffs. There's not a prayer of that.
They could be a second half 500 team, though.
But they could be an interesting looking team in the second half, okay? And by that I mean...
With a new manager. Can we get that too?
As long as we're wishing and hoping,
Can
sure,
Grady
why not?
Sizemore just try his hand or somebody else
sitting
there, maybe?
Yeah, and maybe we'll get a campfire helmet milkshake too.
Right.
But there is definitely a little bit more of a methodical madness going on here than, say, a team that just is either throwing everybody out there who they feel is young and maybe has a chance, or is just not spending money for the sake of not spending money and doesn't really have any real idea of who they're building around or what they're doing, or is just out there flailing around with whatever they got. The Mets, for example, are a team that does not seem to have a plan. Nobody really seems to understand what the Mets are. Are they going to be a team that spends a ton of money and tries to buy championships? Are they trying to develop stuff? They seem to be caught in between, which is a bad place to be if you're Hawk Harrelson's devotees at the plate, but also as a front office. Chris Getz went cheap and said, I'm going for veterans. I'm going for guys that I think can play defense. It's dubious whether or not they can actually do that.
I want to say SIS put something out. It's like one of these stats accounts that the White Sox, at least as of just the other day, were 30th in Major League Baseball in defensive runs saved. So the defense thing. Now, I did see one person argue, well, Luis Robert Jr. is not playing right now, and Yoel Moncada is a really good defender, and you take them off the team, they're not going to be a top 10 defense. But take them off the team, they still shouldn't be 30th if the idea was that Paul DeYoung and Nicky Lopez and some of these other guys were going to raise your defensive play, because it has not translated, at least statistically, yet.
Right. And so, that's what Chris Getz said. Whether or not it's what he's accomplished, no. But is there opportunities, and have we already seen guys get a chance to come up and do stuff? Well, yeah, here's Brian Ramos. We have seen a Jonathan Cannon start. We have seen a Nick Nastrini start or two for both of them. I do think that the plan will be to see what some of the young guys can do. I actually think we'll maybe even see Oscar Colas get another chance. We'll see Dominic Fletcher certainly get another chance at some point.
Pedro's never going to let Oscar Colas play. You understand? I think Pedro Grifol gets fired by mid-season or some point in this season. He's going to get fired. Somebody else is going to take over, and you'll see guys like Colas called up almost immediately afterwards, and you'll see the young guys get more opportunities, but they won't let Pedro do it. That's what I really think will happen.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that's something that could happen in the second half more anyway, because at that point, too, you may find yourself on a team that does not have the three guys that are currently inhabiting the outfield for the most part, Robbie Grossman, Tommy Pham, and Andrew Benintendi even. Okay? Those guys could be either benched or gone. In the case of Pham, probably gone. In the case of Grossman, maybe gone because he's DFA'd if he's not performing. In the case of Benintendi, just maybe, he loses his spot in the lineup if he's not hitting and he's not performing up to his contract. And you sit there and go, well, next year we'll see what we can squeeze out of the dude. But that, I think, is going to be the plan, is see what you got. Okay. And what you do with that is you make it so that see what you got by putting a bunch of guys on the team that nobody cares about. If this team does not finish the season with Paul DeJong on the roster, nobody but Paul DeJong, Paul DeJong's mom and family, and his wife, I assume he's married, and maybe his children if he's got them, and maybe like one guy who's still rocking the Cardinals Paul DeJong jersey, is really going to care that Paul DeJong got DFA'd. It's just not going to be the case. This is a team of disposable players so that Chris Getz has the flexibility and the opportunity to sit there and say, I'm going to figure out what else I got in this organization. And that is as good a plan as any.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.